Adam of Bremen and Fricco. In this video, it will investigate the name Fricco mentioned by Adam of Bremen. First, we're going to start off talking about Adam of Bremen himself. Now, who was he? Well, he was a historian and a geographer. So he was from a place called Meissen, which is in Upper Saxony, as you can see here on the map. It's quite in the area near to, perhaps Leipzig. Now, here is where he gets his of Bremen from. So apparently in 1067, 1068, Adam of Bremen, our boy Adam, really from Meissen, went to Bremen on invitation by Adalbert, who was an archbishop. As well, it's important to bear in mind of this year, 1067 and 1068. This is well long after the Saxon Wars that Charlemagne warred against the pagan Saxons, and this is also a time when not only Latin, of course, was the language of the church and the state essentially, but also what also had more prestige, I would say, is the Franconian dialect of Old High German. So that's something to bear in mind with this Adam of really Meissen and then Bremen, that Franconian Old High German is a big influence, which would explain a few things I will say in this video. Adam of Bremen is also well known for his famous work in Latin, which is called the Gesta Hammaburgensis ecclesiae pontificum, and this is the famous text that tells the description of the temple called Temple of Uppsala in Sweden, and in it talks about a temple. There were allegedly by Adam of Bremen that there were three what Dharmists would call murtis, or if you will in the West, idols of Odin, Thor, and Freyr. And here is the excerpt that talks about the deities in question. We have Thor, we have Wodan, and we have Fricco. As a little reminder, as I said before, this is well after the Saxon Wars, and that Adam of Bremen is from Meissen in Upper Saxony. Went to Bremen, and obviously there is within him there is definitely a Franconian, Old High German Franconian influence, and we can see this reflected through his writing with Wodan and Fricco, but more on this as we carry on. Here, this is important, where it says that Fricco was the third, and how do we know this Fricco name is really of Freyr? Well, in the second underlined sentence here, that it means essentially he's the one with the large phallus, and to indicate fertility or what have you. And that's how we know that's Freyr, because he's associated with fertility and, a phallus. So, in a nutshell, Fricco, or if you will, Fricco, is definitely Freyr in this context, especially by the description given by Adam. Now, briefly said earlier that Fricco is, given the old High German influence, so particularly the Franconian influence. So Fricco or Fricco is definitely Old High German. And how do we know that it's Old High German? Well, it's attested as a personal name. There are a lot of variants of it, because thing is, this is a time long before the printing press. So even within the town, people would spell names differently for wherever you go, right? So, and this is attested here as a male name, and this is in a book called Altdeutsches Namenbuch by Ernst Wilhelm Fürstermann. And the first name there, Fricco, that's from a source from 803, so that's 9th century, and we're going to look at that source, bang, right here. Oh, look at that. And the source is called Corpus Traditionum Fuldensium. So it's in the, forgive me if I'm getting the word wrong, abbey or monastery of Fulda, I believe this is associated with. I mean, just for a heads up, this source that I'm looking at is also the same source that Jacob Grimm in his Teutonic Mythology references time and time again, by the way. And link is down below to access this. You're very welcome. Well, let's move on. So, but the thing is, there's a great linguistic issue with the name Fricco. because Fricco or Fricco is not a direct cognate of the Old Norse Freyr. What is a cognate to the Norse deity is Fro in Old High German, and its older form of Frouwa, which is the cognate of Old Norse Freyr. Moving on, the thing is with Old High German, that final O and final A when it comes to nouns, the final O denotes a male agent and the final A denotes a female or neuter agent. So having said that, the problem is we have Freca here, or Freca here, and this is a name of the goddess Frigg in Old High German, and we know this because we have again Ernst, Wilhelm man, he says so. That how this tends to be in the case. If any of you can read German, in Southern German, this stem was the case, where you'd see this and whatnot. And it's interesting because the thing is, we looked before that Fricco is definitely a name, is definitely an attested personal name. And switching it with an A at the end, that would make it feminine, right? But anyway, moving on, we also have another guy here, Robert Ferguson. He references rstemann here, that we see here, Freca again with this spelling, right? So moving on though, going further with this, so in Old High German, that double K, CK, CC answers to Old English CG. And CG in Old English makes sort of an ij sound. So think of words like bridge, ridge, ij. Alright, and here we have the name of the goddess Frigg in Old English of Frigg. This is one of the names, Frigg. And the double K, CK, CC in Old High German answers to Old Norse GG. This is what Grimm says, essentially the same thing, where you see this correspondence between Norse, Old Norse GG, ASCG, Old High German CC, or KK. Here's another example from Joseph Wright's grammar of Old High German. For those of you who don't know, Joseph Wright is actually known to be Tolkien's tutor. Not many people know that, but he also wrote grammar books on old languages, and Old High German was one of them. So here we have the Old English word "müj," which evolved in later "mij," cognate to Old High German "muka" and "muga." Given this variant of like C and G, you see this a lot in Old High German dialects and whatnot, that C and Gs tend to be interchangeable. Well, depending on what dialect you're looking at and whatnot. So what does that suggest? That suggests that the C, in this case in the double form here, that it's definitely a guttural stop. So a k, a g, so k and g. Okay, so that's important to know. So moving on, we have again we have the CC, the CK, the KK in Old High German with its variant of GG. With the example of, I said earlier, of muka, muga, later mij, and then another example of ruki, ruki, with this variant of rugi. Alright? So, moving on, according to Adam, if Fricco is Freyr, then Freca, or Freca, would be Freyja. If we're going to go by Adam's logic here. And even Grimm says this too. So, like, Adam of Bremen came to put Fricco instead of Frouwa for Freyr. Because thing is with linguistics, it's for those of you who have studied linguistics or know a little bit about linguistics, is that it's not, guesswork. A lot of it is very systematic. But when it comes to reconstructing names and things like that, there are some rules to apply and whatnot, and what would be likelihood be the name of a deity or what have you. But in this case, we have Adam who puts Fricco when he should have put Fro. But let's move on, and we have Freca here, which according to his logic would be Freya. But moving on. So, what is cognate to Freya? Well, in Old High German, it's Frouwa. Frouwa. That is cognate to Freyja, and then we have in Old High German Frouwa, which contracted to just Fro, it is the cognate to Freyr in Old High German. So we move on. It turns out that according to Grimm, that Frouwa was apparently lost and was overtaken by the word truchtin. This word is cognate to Old English drichten, which means lord, or in a non-Christian context it means a military leader or whatnot. So moving on. But the thing is, given with Fricco being the masculine, but Freca is, like, especially with Frau Freca and her variants, like Frau Freca or Frau Freca or what have you, this is actually attested in later folklore in German-speaking areas and said to be a Frigg. When we have, starting with Grimm, that in this paragraph, in this part of his Teutonic Mythology in Volume 1, starting here, and then he goes into detail about how in Lower Saxony, she's known as Fru Freca. So this is so according to Grimm here, that Freca is a descendant of Freca, right? So, but moving on, so with Adam of Bremen or Adam of Meissen, it's really, again, you got to bear in mind of like where he's from. He's from Upper Saxony. He's from he went to Bremen. This is very Frankish oriented. This is well after the Saxon wars or whatnot. So I would imagine the Franconian influence, or Frankish influence, if you will, is very dominant in his linguistic psyche when not writing in Latin, right? So so going back to to his Gesta Hammaburgensis ecclesiae pontificum, that, like, what do we have here? We have a Latinized Old Norse word of, like, th for Thor. We have Wodan, and Wodan is Old High German, an older form of Old High German, because Wotan is actually a later spelling which happened around in the 8th and 9th century. And Wodan is, very well could be an Old Saxon word. Yeah, it very well could be an Old Saxon word. And then we have this Fricco word. So the thing is to say about Adam, that he's from Germany, and he's describing, a Scandinavian place. So I don't think this guy, it was in his best interest to, like, keep an account of, like, how the names are and how they're supposed to be and whatnot. I think that wasn't his main concern. I think the main thing was just to describe the temple, not so much dwell on the names themselves, right? And, he wasn't a linguist like me, but anyway. So in conclusion, Adam of Bremen or Adam of Meissen, I guess you could call it linguistic negligence, but then again, he was a product of his time. His job was to describe what he saw and whatnot, not to be so meticulous with the names of deities and then presenting the names in a respectable manner and whatnot, how it would be understood by pagans and whatnot. I mean, again, going back, we have, like, a Latinized Norse word, Thor. We have a possibly Old High German or Old Saxon spelling of Wodan here, and then we got Fricco, which is an attested a male personal name and whatnot. So I don't think the names were really that much of a concern. It's just get a placeholder to describe the deities in question, not be so exact about the names. Anyway, guys, let's say thank you for watching. I had a lot of fun making this video. I had a lot of fun doing the research in making this video, and finally putting this information out there to conclusively figure out and then explain this name Fricco. Again, thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you're new, and if you want to help out the channel, please become a patron at my Patreon page down below. Thanks for watching.